Uh, uh, yes? Can I? Yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining this session. It's a great pleasure in addressing this room of experts and leaders on this topic, empowering local climate technology. My name is Samantha Shin. I'm a senior manager in finance and research at UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerators. We call it UICCA. Climate tech stands as a catalytic to enhance the way to address the pressing issue of climate change. It harnesses the potential of innovation across all sectors, offering potential solutions to reduce emissions and build a sustainable and climate resilient future. To empower and scale climate technology, we need to ask these questions. What are the critical elements that nurture the climate technology and innovation? Second, how can we create the environment that can nurture and spark the climate innovation and also ensure that those climate innovations are empowering to make the positive impact on the ground? To answer those questions, the UICCA and our partners started to investigate the needs of local startups. And we identified that local startups need three things: policy and licensing support, enabling pilots, and sufficient investment and financing at the earlier stage of their business. In the region, and specifically in the UAE, we found that the ideation and conceptualization and building a minimum viable products are well provided and supported by both public and private sector. However, gaps and challenges appear when they are trying to scale their business. This has been our driving force to support the startups that we are accelerating at the UICCA. Whether it's facilitating the connection with potential partners, creating the access to suitable financing and investment, and advocating for policy reform. But we identified that it is vital to work with the innovation that we are accelerating with. As an example, UICCA has organized a policy hack, a series of policy dialogue with high-level policymakers and business leaders, and we address what are the challenges across that has been identified among the startups, and we also talk about the solution, how to address those challenges. Our first policy hack was around the circularity of electric mobility, and that was back in May this year. And we identified the one startup, the UAE-based startup called Peak Mobility, and we showcased their case. So that was, the Peak case was demonstrated their innovative and creative solution, but also they show the potential environmentally and economically positive impact. So after this policy hack, our policy research team and finance team has developed our policy report on electric mobility, how to adopt electric mobility in the UAE. And we identify several short-term considerations on that. First, introducing financial incentives for electric vehicle infrastructure. Second, conducting feasibility and user preference studies. And third, raising awareness across the whole value chain. And lastly, we also highlighted that the collaboration and effective cooperation among stakeholders are critical as we want to create this momentum together. Indeed, collective goals of accelerating climate startups growth cannot be achieved without cooperation and collaboration. Today's session, we will discuss technology and innovation, strategies, and partnerships that empower the startups to flourish their business in a global and local level. Before we go into the panel discussion, I would like to invite Heiko Seitz, is that right? Heiko Seitz, a global mobility leader of PwC. He's gonna give us the overview of the electric vehicle trend and then set the scene. Heiko, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam. And it's good to see you all, and it's great to be here at COP in the Blue Zone to talk with you about one of the topics that really drive the conversations just beyond where we are right now. Because I think it's no exaggeration to clearly say that we are, as a society, going through one of the largest industrial and societal transformation this century, our generation will have seen by far. And it's about how we move and also how we energize mobility. And as I can see here, it addresses all of us, and it's great to also welcome the new generations to the hall. Welcome, it's great to have you here. So, we have already the slides here. Now, when you think about mobility, what is mobility? And it's much more than just moving from A to B. Mobility is a pillar of prosperity, of economic growth, and it's a basic need. It provides us with access. It provides us with access to food, to education, to healthcare, to work, and therefore to income. And I think we all saw during COVID what can happen if we are not mobile when we're locked in at home. You know, we saw social unrest. We saw big tensions in society. So we really need mobility. At the same time, it's a pretty dirty thing, isn't it? So 24%, or if you read some other reports, 25%, but pretty much there, of global CO2 emissions come from the transport sector. So why we can't live without mobility? We still have to think about how we can decarbonize it. And that's one of the things I think we're all here, because we all share the same purpose of thinking about how we can make the world cleaner and greener by providing accessibility and security and comfort to the people and to the industries. So we need to decarbonize it. Now, when we think about how the world decarbonizes, well, we have developed this heat map, right? And it shows that the world decarbonizes, electrifies and partly decarbonizes mobility, because it's not always the same thing necessarily, in geographical stages and phases, right? And when you look at the heat map, the red areas on that map are the front runners of the electrification of mobility. So that's the US, it's China, it's Europe, it's also India. India is a different market, it's more 2- and 3-wheelers. And then you have the follower countries. So these follower countries have a great opportunity to leverage, to harvest and leverage all these lessons learned captured in these Wave 1 markets to build their ecosystem. And by the way, we're in one of these Wave 2 regions right now, in the UAE, in the Middle East, to build the ecosystems here and in other parts of the world faster, more profitably, also more cost efficiently, less resource wasteful, and building ecosystems that are really customer-centric, leveraging all these right technologies and the processes, approaches that have been proven, and avoiding these that didn't work. And that's a great opportunity. Now, let's remind ourselves why we talk about electrification of mobility. What we have done at PwC, we have compared all these different main transport modes: fossil fuels, hydrogen, battery electricity, e-fuels, because especially in Europe recently, e-fuels have been more in the conversations, because obviously there's natural reluctance to move away from an established ecosystem, industrial ecosystem. And we have compared these from the CO2 footprint, cradle to grave. And cradle to grave means what you see here on the screen behind me. That is the CO2 footprint from production of a vehicle, including the production of the battery, by the way. So this includes the battery CO2 footprint production up to the point of recycling it. And when you look at it, the fossil fuel, no matter how green you produce it, because on the lower part of the stack chart, that's the production of the vehicle. On the upper part, it's the run. No matter how green you build them, when you run them with fossil fuels, they're always the most dirty alternative. And then on the other hand, and this is for me a key message, because it's not just enough to electrify mobility, it is not. We also have to think about what's the energy behind it, because in the middle you have an electric vehicle built with green energy, but run with gray energy. What's gray energy? It's coal, it's gas. We don't really know what's inside. So we really need to think about energy behind it to make it really green. And then we have a huge opportunity to reduce the CO2 footprint down to 25%. It's a huge opportunity. But it's not just about being green and clean. We also have to be pragmatic, which brings me to cost, the cost of running fleets. And when we think about if we want to incentivize users of mobility, and especially think about B2B users, fleet operators, has to drive their business case, right? If you talk money, then suddenly you have a different incentive. And so again, we have compared the energy efficiency. How much energy do I need to move? And well, battery electricity is 3 times more energy efficient than fossil fuel and also than hydrogen. And that is also one of the regions that we witness in the world that it was always the question, who wins the race, H2 or battery electricity? I think it's very clear that the champion of electrified mobility is not hydrogen. There are lots of hydrogen use cases out there that will make the world a better and cleaner place. But for mobility, it's battery electricity. And there is a key message that actually is not right, and I actually wanted to update. It was already too late. I sent the slides to Sam. When you look at this number, what does that mean? If we manage to electrify the entire world fleet, which is theoretical because we're not able to do that, we can reduce world energy consumption by approximately 12%. What does that mean? If we manage to move to battery electricity, the world needs energy. So we can use that energy for other things. We also can possibly reduce geopolitical dependencies. And we can be simply more circular in whatever we do. So there's a great opportunity beyond saving or reducing the CO2 footprint. There's a great opportunity there. And on that note, I would like to hand back to Sam, because it's not my job to invite the panelists, but I look forward to be part of your panel. So thank you very much, and happy to answer all your questions as part of the panel. Thank you.
Without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you, first of all. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a panelist for this session. Let me first introduce our panelists today. Let me start by Asma. Asma Al-Nabuda is the director of UAE Regulations Lab, General Secretary of the Cabinet. She leads and manages the UAE Regulations Lab from building the ecosystem, and her role is to manage emerging technologies project, scale and accelerate adoption of innovation technologies, and to recommend required future regulations. Hamzas Sheikh is an assistant manager of innovation and technology at UICCA, UAE Independent Climate Change Accelerators. Hamza is actively involved in the climate tech sector, playing a critical role in enabling and fostering the growth of climate tech startups in the UAE. And Hamza is a seasoned professional working on different sectors, including oil and gas, energy sector, aviation, and education. Lastly, Heiko Seitz, right? Yes. Seitz. Heiko is a global e-mobility leader of PwC. He's a trusted advisor for governmental decision makers and industry C-suites to shape and execute a successful transformation towards sustainable and profitable e-mobility transition. Let me begin with Heiko. So thanks for the presentation. So you provide us a broader view of the landscape of global decarbonization pathway. What implication can you give us in the MENA perspective? How can the local startups in the MENA region can take that insight, market trends in the local perspective. Can you elaborate that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Sam, for having us. Look, when you think about it, what drives, smart mobility? I don't only want to say decarbonized mobility because that's one of the elements. It's a couple of mega trends. One is, we mentioned it before, 24% of CO2 emissions come from the transport sector. It's something that we have to work on, or where we have a responsibility to decarbonize. We have rapid urbanization in the world, where simply the demography across countries change, where there is a need also to reshape, because it's the way how we live changes. I don't know, I think the microphone was on and off, but now it works. So climate change, rapid urbanization, we see that users in general have a shifted tendency to consume mobility differently. We see that we all got used to Netflix and Amazon. We always want everything available at the tip of the finger. We don't want to commit to stuff. We want to consume flexibly. And then there is all this new technology that users expect to be able to use and also provide more efficiency. So when you think about these mega trends, we see that suddenly not only mobility, but the world we live in completely changes. The way how we live, how we produce, how we eat as well, by the way, and how we move. And as this is all technology driven, we also see that suddenly the value chains, which I find quite interesting when I work with my clients, completely change. We used to have an automotive industry that built cars, that's it. We had an energy industry that produced and sold energy, that's it, and so on and so forth. And now suddenly that doesn't work anymore. So we suddenly see, and this is important for the startups, we are moving away from linear value chains to an ecosystem where all these linear value chains fade and merge into each other, right? And suddenly the barriers to entry completely change. In order to play, for example, in electric mobility, you don't need to be a utility anymore with heavy capex, or you don't need to be an automotive anymore with a long legacy. You need technology and a smart business model. And then you have to go out there, try stuff, and find investors. So my key message is that, that there was a little startup. You may have heard of Tesla, Tesla started to try to raise funds, 15, 20 years ago. Elon Musk went to the boardroom, said, I want to build electric cars. I believe it's the future. Everybody said he's crazy and it will never work. And now he has set the new standard. So the barriers to entry are redefined. There are great opportunities based on technology to really shape something that's actually very relevant for this region as well here.
Thank you. Let me go to Hamza. So you're working at the UAE as an innovation and technology manager. And can you comment on your experience in supporting local climate technology? What has been your role at UAE?
So first of all, thanks for having me here. I think the first word that comes to my mind is inspiring. I really have been inspired by the creativity and the ingenuity of some of these entrepreneurs that we've dealt with at the UAE in supporting their startups. So just a little bit of background, I did my undergrad in geology years and years ago, so I have a little bit of understanding of the Earth's climatic cycles over geological time, the carbon cycle, the water cycle. So when I was studying climate change in my postgraduate studies, it really painted a bleak picture. How are we going to address some of these climate issues that we're facing today? But dealing with these entrepreneurs and the different startups, and across the sectors, we deal with startups that are addressing issues in food and water security, decarbonization, and of course mobility and transport. I quickly began to be reassured that the technology and the will to do something about these issues from a technology side is there. I think locally we need to create an environment that fosters and enables these technologies to be accelerated from an ideation stage to a pilot and testing phase, and finally to implementation. Just the one thing I did want to mention is traditionally sustainability, the topic of sustainability has been predominantly a social science. When I was doing my undergrad 15 years ago, it was predominantly being taught within the social sciences. I think it's really important that universities take a multidisciplinary approach so that the engineers and the scientists and the business grads also have a sound understanding of the climate crisis issues that communities all around the world are facing, in an effort for them to, be able to address those problems from, tech or a business side, and on the other side as well. I think with the social scientists, they have to have an understanding of the role technology can play and the best way to deploy it in whatever context it needs to be deployed. So yeah, the experience has been encouraging and reassuring, but at the same time, I think we still need to enable an environment where they can grow from that ideation stage to implementation stage a little bit faster.
And actually, I have a follow-up question, if I may. So, thanks for sharing your experience, but how exactly can you, do you help the local startups at the UICCA, working with universities and different stakeholders? What was your role and how did you promote those technologies?
Right. So I guess traditional accelerators usually put out a call to solve a problem, and they have a deadline, and then they take applicants and they move a cohort along together. Our approach has been a little bit different. As long as a startup has a solution that addresses a net zero issue here in the UAE and has UAE impact, we're willing to listen to them, and we sit down with them and we essentially tailor-make a plan just for them on how to get them to market. Sometimes they need investment support. Sometimes it's just the connections with the right industry stakeholders. But I think there's been a few cases where with Reg Lab we've offered policy and regulatory support, and I think that is sort of like the underscoring issue that I think needs to take more of a spotlight when it comes to climate tech.
Thank you so much. Tailored solution. Asma, over to you. So for those in the audience who may not be familiar with the UAE Regulations Lab, could you provide the overview of the Reg Lab and just to share how you accelerate the testing process for the technology in the UAE?
Good evening, all. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to talk about UAE Regulation Lab and COP and this platform where we share a set of fundamental principles and inspirations, such as a doing mindset with the speed and efficiency, and a co-creation approach when it comes to designing solutions and scaling our knowledge both locally and globally. The UAE Regulation Lab is one of the UAE Cabinet's practical tools established to provide minimum viable licenses for disruptive emerging technology-based projects that we take it through a process of a regulatory sandbox where we give regulation breaks so we can test, iterate in real time, and we learn together to achieve regulation innovation and accelerate the enablement of technology adoption in the UAE. Our regular purpose is to foster an environment for inclusive, sustainable, and scalable change, a change that we want to see now and not in another 10 or 30 years. Since we're talking about climate and sustainability, imagine RegLab as a nursery for endangered species, new species, hybrid, plants that are necessary to maintain our diverse ecosystem. Now, you can take your plant and go straight to the soil, but you may discover that it is too soon, that the soil was not the right one. The temperature is not right. And your plant, although is exactly what our planet needs, will die. Then you have to go back to grow another plant from another seed and repeat it elsewhere. you may get discouraged or drop it as well. Now, you can substitute that plant with your innovation. We at RegLab offer you a diverse environment so you can test your technology. It's okay. So you'll be able to test your technology, and we monitor and control growth, and we remove all the barriers that would make it hard and slow if it's done in real world first. Then we activate that ecosystem through regulations. When the innovators and the startup, they are ready, they have all the data that they can take it or scale it and diversify it with the guarantee that their technology will not only survive, it will thrive everywhere. RegLab is open for any emerging technology, but this year, 2023, most of our applications were related to emission submissions. And we have licensed a couple of projects like eVTOL aircraft for future of cargo operations in the UAE and the region, as well as many electric vehicle projects. What we really believe is that we believe in making government ready for change by being agile, proactive, and resilient. And that's what allows us to invite all the startup innovators and entrepreneurs to come and experiment and innovate in our sandbox.
Thank you for highlighting agility and flexibility of the RegLab for supporting the startups. Now back to Hamza. You supported a local UAE startup. I also mentioned that UICCA has been supporting the peak mobility. Can you please elaborate on the peak case and the success story around that?
Right, so Peak Mobility is a UAE-based startup founded by a brilliant young entrepreneur, Zach Faisal. And they are repurposing and re-engineering existing petrol vehicles into electric vehicles. And they're actually targeting entire fleets of vehicles and turning them into electric vehicles. This is a solution that is 30% more cost effective than manufacturing new EVs and 80% more time efficient. So they had engaged with the RTA to offtake the retired Toyota Camrys from the RTA Dubai taxi fleet and re-engineer them into EVs and then sell it back to them, sell it back to the RTA. And RTA, of course, is on board because this is in line with their goal for electrifying and hybridizing their fleet by 2027. Now, the obstacle that Peak was facing was regulatory in nature. There was no regulatory or policy framework available that would allow those cars to be on Dubai's roads. So we at the UICCA, we organized our first series of policy hack event where we invited all the relevant public and private sector stakeholders, had a roundtable discussion. So the different ministries were there, RTA was there, insurance companies were there, RegLab was there, and that's where Peak Mobility was introduced to RegLabs. And I think Esma and her team right away understood the vision of repurposing and re-engineering these vehicles as a circular solution towards net zero in the mobility sector. And over the next few months, Esma and her team tabled the discussion about Peak, advocating for Peak in the right regulatory settings. And we're now finally at a point where we should be securing a license for Peak that will allow one of their prototype vehicles on Dubai's roads for 1 year. So that's a success story, and they're one step closer to commercialization.
Thanks for sharing that Peak success story. Now back to Heiko. Can you share, following up this Peak case, can you share more positive cases in the UAE or in the MENA region for transitioning from petrol to to electric vehicle? Do you have any examples?
I think the whole world is looking at the Middle East right now when it comes to the birth of a new industrial ecosystem. Because, I mean, I was just in the innovation pavilion over there in the green zone. You had Newton Ruptan, which is an EV. This one is actually a range extender EV, but collaboration with Li Auto from China to build electric vehicles in Abu Dhabi, which is an example. But especially if you look at Saudi, right? PIF there is not a single week or a single month where that there is not a major announcement of a big, serious, manufacturing alliance. Hyundai is now investing into Saudi. Foxconn is building cars together with BIF. The Sear brand, the first Saudi-made EV, which probably will launch in the next 2-3 years. You have tire manufacturers. It's quite exciting that actually while we are here having a channel vision or tunnel vision on EVs, there is a birth of a new sustainable ecosystem in the region. NEOM is having Oxagon, they're building manufacturing elements. So there is so much happening. And that's actually the reason why I moved here, because this is where it happens right now in the world. The Middle East is becoming a very exciting innovation hub and an industrial hub. And I think it's plenty of opportunity. And when you look at it, there is a close relationship between startups and the industry, because startups very often have the great ideas, the crazy ideas sometimes that industry doesn't dare to have because they're very focused on their day-to-day business. And these startups then have an opportunity to get sold, acquired, and scaled up in large organizations that then have the capability, the capital, and the processes. So great opportunities here, and one of the most dynamic ecosystems in the world right now. I think it's great to be here.
And my follow-up question would be, what role do you see the governments in the MENA region can play in accelerating more, the electric vehicle adoption?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And I mean, there are two ways governments can treat any new trend. One is hands-off, market-led, or then, hands-on, top-down, and regulated. And when we look at this part of the world, we have seen much less regulation and much less incentives as well than, for example, in Europe. Europe loves subsidies, etc., to push things and to scale them up, to bring them to a maturity level. Here we don't see that yet. I think we will see more incentives in the region when you listen to government stakeholders. I let you to comment that one because you're much closer than I am, because you're part of it. But I think this is where also accelerators have such a great role here, which is maybe even more important and purposeful than in more mature markets, because the accelerators can maybe provide stimulus where the government don't. But I actually think that there is serious capital, and we see serious capital being channeled also towards more innovation things. And I mean, this region also wants to be seen in the world as one of the most innovative parts in the world, and you obviously don't do that if you stay small. So state has a direct interest in building a sustainable, profitable future, and also to showcase it right now.
Thanks for sharing. So now, I mean, because we're talking about government role, I'm going to go back to Asma. And do you have any tips for anyone applying via the Regulab process? Is there anything that the local climate tech audience can do to take the Regulab license?
Okay. So let me be thorough and concise at the same time. I'll give you 6 things that they have to must do when applying, and only one thing that they shouldn't do. So number 1, they have to show a demonstration of a technology value. How is the proposed technologies adding value to the problem they are trying to solve? Number 2, they have to identify the barriers. Currently, what is exactly stopping them from implementing and adopting their technology? Is it a regulation? Number 3 is the business model disruptive, and how? Or is it a sustaining innovation? That's very important, because with that, we will look at, is it creating a new market, or it's developing an existing market as well. Number four, the startup who's applying in RegLab, they should have the financial resources to be able to produce their technology and operate it during the testing. They must have a clear test plan when they submit to us, at least high level, with a milestone, with a clear scope that we can take it and accelerate it into licensing. Lastly, number 6, which is whether this technology has been tested in another country. Is there any research, a benchmark that has been done so that we can take it into consideration? The only thing that they should avoid when applying to us is submitting volumes of unnecessary details that are relevant to the point that I discussed. It has to be very clear, straight to the point, so we can evaluate their application on a timely basis.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. This is 6 rules or recommendations for submitting the compelling application. My last question is for everyone. If you could empathize one crucial element concerning the empowerment and support the local climate technology, what would it be and why you think that's crucial? Maybe we can start with...
You know, we see a lot of people talking a lot of stuff when we go to conferences, and then the question is, who does it? And I think for me, this is all about, you know, walking the talk, action, and entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship means that I don't just have a great idea, but I actually go out and make it happen, and I take the responsibility to make my idea a reality if it's worth it, right? Which is not always easy, because sometimes you have to also kill your idea if you realize you're getting there. That's a different story. But for me, if I summarize it in one word, it's action or entrepreneurship.
I think the one crucial element to support the local climate technology is it's not related to technology, and that is an open dialogue. We have to remember that technology at the end of the day is must serve us, both humanity and our planet. Within the RegLab ecosystem, we encourage continuous dialogue between the startup, the entrepreneurs, the innovator, the regulators, the decision makers. We're not only simply focusing on the testing, we're more empathically connected and interested in the concern, the challenges, the opportunities, the dialogue. It's all part of the development. It's too easy to say that we get to catch up with the innovation, and but what truly matters is the dialogue itself. So it starts with the dialogue, and we as a RegLab enables it.
I think the policy and regulatory support is crucial to incentivize the funding and the research and the testing and the piloting of new technologies. And this, of course, I think can be in the form of, it could be a grant, it could be access to resources such as manufacturing capacity or land, tax incentives for, some of the big players that are willing to, pilot new technologies in their facilities. So I think, the regulatory space definitely can play a role.
If I may summarize, so first one is innovation. First one is action, entrepreneurship. So we need to initiate, and we need to, use this availability of technology. So that's important one. Second one, open dialogue and collaboration among stakeholders, from regulations, private sectors, and even like small startups, SMEs. And lastly, Hamza, you highlight the importance of policy and regulatory framework and support to actually incentivize those startups in the region, in the country. with that, I want to open the floor, and if you have any questions, please raise your hand and raise some questions for our panelists. I think we have about 5 minutes to address your questions. So if you have any questions about technology, innovation, startup, if you have any questions about Regulab application, if you're a startup, do you have any question? No? If not, I can maybe have one more question. So like, I think the most important thing I hear is this collaboration, like how, like stakeholder collaboration. I mean, as Asma said, so like how can we actually promote this as like effective collaboration among stakeholders? How can we do that? Heiko, do you want to start first?
Well, I think we're doing that already. I mean, I think the effective collaboration. You know, we're having so many platforms out there, accelerators, conferences, etc. I don't see too much of a challenge there. But I think the challenge is very often like scouting the right technologies and then bringing them to scale. What I see as, you know, an organization that obviously also supports incumbent industries with incumbent technologies and incumbent supply chains that, you know, want to be used and don't want to be decommissioned. You know, it's sometimes the question is about, you know, do I sometimes take the uncomfortable step and push into a direction where maybe technology is being pushed that is maybe, you know, also destroying something. Sometimes you have to destroy in order to rebuild. And I think this is where I want to highlight the role of government, because the government should have, you know, on the one hand, obviously the responsibility to protect labor and ecosystems, etc., but also to look into the future and take decisions that are uncomfortable today because they are necessarily and urgent for possibly even the survival of the planet in the future. And I think this is where I think governments have the role, elected governments representatives, to support, you know, the interest of our future generations. And this is where I don't see enough action, you know. But this is why we're here at COP. Huh?
The leadership and the role of government for the collaboration. Asma?
I think we need to put the co-creation in the heart of the ecosystem, where everyone has a part and contribution to design and develop the technology or the business model itself. Because at the end of the day, the consumer will be affected, the community, the government, the private sector. So I think when we come together, there should be a model where we all agree on how to co-create together.
So co-creation of the business model, so that means we need to engage stakeholders at an earlier stage because we want to design this business case together, right?
Yeah. As an example, we had a company X, which is a global company, where they wanted to do a specific testing in the UAE. So they come with their own methodology, where they start with a data collection process. So we went through their negotiation with them is that why do we have to repeat the data collection? If we provide you as a government the raw data, with that works. So it took a while. For them it was a destructive question where the government comes and say, we want to be part of your business model, where we give you the data and you can continue from there. So it's not like starting from point zero. So this is where we say, like, this is just a simple example of how we can co-create, how we can work together, both the private sector and the government.
Okay, thank you. And Hamza?
I think Asma took the word out of my mouth. Co-creation, co-creation between communities, between academia, between industry, and between government.
So with that, I think I can close the session. I hope it was a meaningful session and you gained some useful insights around how to empower the local technology. We learned that initiation, the entrepreneurship, and the availability of the startup technology, that's important. We also learned that the role of government regulations are important for this journey. And lastly, co-creation of the business model at an earlier stage, and engagement, like engagement of diverse stakeholders to make this successful, profitable, and sustainable business case. With that, I'm going to close the session, and please, round of applause, please. Thank you so much for our panelists. Thank you so much.